Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Good night. Today I'm with Marwa Osman, super lady from Lebanon. Thank you for joining my show. What if I call you the spokesperson for the axis of resistance? How are you, Marwa? Is it okay?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Muhammad, for having me. I would be honored, but I am too much of worthless to be a spokesperson of the resistance. I'm honored to just be a speck under the feet of the fighters who are trying to regain our rights, whether in South Lebanon, in Palestine, in Yemen, in
Yes.
Syria, in Iraq, in Iran. So I'm just a speck. I'm a nobody, but it would be an honor for me to just be a supporter,
Yes.
the actions of resistance.
Okay, Marwa. Today we will discuss the contribution, yeah, of the axis of resistance movement in formation of multipolar worlds. Yeah, a few days ago, Professor Marandi made a statement to BBC Press Center that Iran's relations with axis resistance is not proxy but alliance, having a same anti-colonial and imperialist vision. It seemed that the axis of resistance used the old anti-colonial and imperialist jargon, not using the term again unipolar for multipolar word. My question is, what is the axis of resistance? Please explain for a short version. Please, Marwa.
I would very much approve and agree with what Dr. Marandi said because it seems for some reason for the Western world they are unable to fathom the idea that people around the world, especially natives who share the same struggle against the same imperial and colonial powers, have the capability and the right to form alliances, just as the colonial powers of the West have been doing so since the late, if not mid 1800s, if I'm not mistaken. So it's halal for them, haram for others. But the issue is what the West doesn't really understand, or the Western audience doesn't really fully understand, is what is this axis of resistance? The axis of
Okay.
resistance
Mm.
is a group of countries, mainly in West Asia, West and Mid Asia. And it started out of a thought, and that thought was turned into a revolution in 1979 at the hands of the leader of the Islamic Revolution in the Islamic Republic of Iran, Ayatollah Ruhullah Khomeini. When Imam Khomeini, if you want to know where the essence of the resistance comes from, it comes from there, from the first spark of revolution that made shockwaves across the world that obviously left a lot of influence in West Asia in specific and a lot of areas who believed in the thought of Imam Ruhullah Khomeini. What happened since 1979, it was basically a few decades after the colonial West had successfully was successfully able to divide the map of West Asia into certain colonies, some of them for France, the others for Britain. Some were then taken out of Britain's hand, given to the United States of America for multiple economic and political reasons. But at the end of the day, it was not in the hands of the natives of the land, one of which was Palestine and Lebanon. And the real spark in Lebanon that took that light of the revolution from Imam Khomeini and lit it in Lebanon was in 1982. Before that, there was a Lebanese resistance with the we had a lot of groups of people that were not really unified, and they were trying their best. They One of the most amazing stories and martyrs come out of these small groups, but at the same time, it was a bit of communists, a bit of the Amal movement led by the late kidnapped Sayyid Musa Sadr, but real resistance in the sense that we know now started in 1982 as Hezbollah in South Lebanon after years of deprivation from their own land, of torture, of incarceration, of killing, of basically just ethnic cleansing, what the Zionist Israelis were trying to do ever since they set foot in this region. So from that came Hezbollah in
Okay,
South
Marwa.
Lebanon.
Wait, 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 wait. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Wait, Marwa. I want to back to Professor Marandi, yeah, because you are expert in media. Okay, it's very sensitive about the word proxy, yeah, proxy and align. Do you think it is different or same pattern? A spatial term that expanding by the colonial media. Or what about your opinion about this?
I didn't
What is
understand the
different
question.
between proxy? What is the difference between proxy and align? Because Professor Marandi
Well,
make
if
a
you would
statement
allow me to
align, not
explain,
proxy.
yeah, if
Okay,
you would
okay.
allow me to explain how the ideology changed the map and therefore created alliances, you will get there. Because people
Mm,
always say that Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran, Houthis are a proxy of Iran. They don't understand the difference between ideology and
mm,
proxy. They don't understand the difference between having a close friend that would support you. Hello, Germany is giving
mm,
now tanks to Israel. Is not that is support? What kind? If this is not an alliance, what is it? The United States of America, during the first 2 weeks of the war, genocidal war in Gaza, was giving millions and millions of dollars worth of weapons to the Zionist entity, which basically manufactures weapons and sells them to the world. Within 2 weeks, they were
mm,
providing them. Is that not an alliance then? Why is it when Iran tries to help natives born in that land, ancestors in that land, defending that land, give them the know-how and the weapons, it becomes a proxy? That's a valid question. A true researcher should start from there. But when you ask me what is the axis of resistance, it is a group of those natives living in that spot who received the know-how and the ability to make their own weapons from nothing, from the Islamic Republic of Iran, and then became fully dependent on themselves in manufacturing new weaponry. Biggest evidence is Yemen for 9 years right now. Blockade, siege, famine, you name it, and they were able to make long-range ballistic missiles that reached more than 2,000 kilometers from the capital Sana'a. Had it not
mm,
been for the persistence and the education and the resistance of that people, where would you get that weapon from? I mean, the United States of America, et al., its friends and its or puppets, if you will, the puppet regime in the region are playing police in the Persian Gulf, in the Arab Sea, in the Red Sea, not allowing even food to get to Sana'a. But know-how reach faster. Know-how, knowledge does not need barriers. It just jumps over barriers. And you need
mm,
persistence. You need people who are ready to get educated and just apply this know-how. Lebanon was the first to do it. Then we saw an alliance, a beautiful alliance between Iran and Iraq and Syria against Takfiri terrorists who were funded, aided, and abated by the West and by regimes in the Middle East. And fourth, we saw the amazing, resilient Yemenis who fought for 9 years, a war that no one could have ever been able to take and to absorb, yet they fought. And not only they defended their land and came out victorious, they decided to be the first open sovereign state in the region of West Asia to say, we will
mm,
stop global maritime navigation
mm,
in support of our brothers and sisters in Gaza. This is what the axis of resistance is. This is what
mm,
the alliance of the axis of resistance is. And it is being clearly portrayed in this Al-Aqsa flood operation, because October 7 happened, October 8. It was 6:55 a.m. My house, South Lebanon. It looks into occupied Palestine and occupied Golan Heights. 6:55 a.m. We woke up to the sound of explosions. We knew those explosions were not Israeli ones. We knew it was the resistance. And just 10 or 15 minutes later, we had the first number one
mm,
statement issued by the resistance saying, we, in support of our people of Gaza, who are being now bombarded by the Zionist entity, are beginning the liberation of full territories in Lebanon. Then the second statement started saying, in support of the Palestinians in Gaza to stop their genocide. But the first one, if you go and
yes.
look at it, it said it is our right as a resistance, as portrayed in international law, to defend our land, protect our land, and liberate what is left of our land that is occupied. This is how it started. Then we saw Syria, we saw in the occupied Golan Heights, we saw
Mm,
Iraq, against the occupation bases of the United States of America in Syria and Iraq. We saw Yemen doing the a maritime blockade against the Zionist entity ships or any ship from anywhere trying to get to Zionist entity force. And last but not least, we saw the Islamic Republic of Iran bombing 3 sites that are directly linked to the Zionist entity. 1, the Mossad house in Erbil. 2, the proxies found in north and northeast of Syria and Idlib and the northern part of Aleppo. And 3, in Pakistan, all directly related to the Mossad and to the terrorist attack that happened in Kerman against civilians who are grieving their leader. All of that happening from all of these different countries, coordinating all together against the attacks coming from the West and from Zionist Israel, is an alliance par excellence. And if anyone doesn't really understand this, trust me, we don't care.
Okay, Marwa, I think like I have a sick question, but I think your explanation is answer my all question. I forget my question, but okay. Let back to my question. Are you trying to say that proxy is like a trap because you want to make differentiate, yeah, axis of resistance as an ideology with different with colonial project? Are you trying to say that?
I'm saying that the axis of resistance is an alliance that works, that is from the people for the people. What do I mean by that? From the people, meaning from each of these countries, it is natives to the land who speak the language, who has lived there, whose ancestors are buried there, all working towards the same end goal, to protect their people, liberate their land against, firstly, the Zionist Israeli entity who was planted in our land as early as the 1870s and not 1948, because 1948 was the foundation of the Israeli regime. But when was this logistic foundation, when was this basis being built? Since the 1970s, as early as 1870s, as early as 1860. Civil wars were being brewed in Bilad al-Sham, what is known as the Levant, in Lebanon and Syria, to prepare for an outer power to come and seize this area. In Lebanon, it was taken by France. Palestine, Lebanon and Syria were taken by France. Palestine and Egypt were taken by, and obviously the Arabian Peninsula, by the Brits. And from then on, they started building the biggest military base on the planet, today known as Israel, to us known as the illegal colonial settlers of the Zionist West. This is how we, the natives of this land, name them, identify them, and we are ready to pay whatever it takes from our lives, from our property, to ensure liberation. This is what the axis of resistance is. Because if you look at it, Muhammad, who are the Yemenis fighting? They're fighting the same people who have been bombing them for the past 9 years. Who are the Lebanese people fighting? They're fighting the same people who are trying to take over Lebanon since 1907. Who are the Syrians fighting? They are fighting the same colonial power who was hungry to eat all up the resources of Syria since the dawn of time. If you look at the historic map of Syria, how big it was, and then how it was eaten chunk by chunk, first by the Turks and then by the French, and then it was divided by Sykes-Picot, and later on by the Takfiri terrorists, and again by the United States of America. Who are they bombing? Who are the Iraqis bombing? Who are they targeting? Occupation soldiers on their land, presented by the United States of America, who happen to be protecting the oil of both Iraq and Syria. So
I get you. I get you.
So
I get your point.
The conclusion is just ask who they are fighting against, and the answer is right there.
Okay, Marwa, you research on knowledge in media. I want to ask you the content of the axis of resistance knowledge. Okay, in more theoretically. Does the axis of resistance have a complete concept that support it exit in war zones? So if we know that Houthi, if we know Hezbollah, if we know Hamas, Jihad Islam, it's just a freedom fighter. I'm not saying that just freedom fighter, but behind that there is a, that you're trying to say to me an ideology. But what I'm trying to say, does the axis of resistance have a complete concept?
Well, it does have a complete concept, but it differs from one country to the other. And that concept is directly related to the culture of the community that is basically supporting or called the environment of that resistance. I'll talk about my environment, which is Lebanon. If you look at
Okay.
the actual uh, if you will, ingredients of the resistance in Lebanon, you see that it is not only freedom fighters. It started as such, but later on, it found that its own environment needs to be secure, it needs to be protected, it needs to have education, it needs to have medical care for that environment to grow stronger and for the resistance fighters to stay protected by that same environment. You get what I'm saying?
Mm.
Hence why in
Yeah.
1982 it was just about uh, it was just about the fighters, the freedom fighters. But if you move on 18 years later, especially after the liberation of the year 2000 in South Lebanon, especially after that, you see that the community of Hezbollah, of the resistance, started changing. How do I say that? They started having their own educational institutions. They started having their own medical institutions. If you look now at Lebanon, and you could see that the major or the most influential or even the best technology medically speaking, are found in the hospitals and medical centers of Hezbollah. Why is that? It is not just
Mm.
about protecting the people from enemy. It's also about protecting the people from division on the inside. So that's why Hezbollah, if you take it as a complete concept, you see how the axis of resistance future will be. But it is not the same in different countries. For example, it's not the same as Syria because Syria is still under war. It's not the same in Iraq because Iraq is still under occupation and it's divided and its economy is in shambles. It's not the same in Yemen. It is starting to become the same in Yemen. Yemen actually was fast-paced. It was faster than Syria and Iraq because the actual issue of division is harder to implement inside of Yemen, easier to implement in Iraq and Syria for multiple anthropological and social reasons and variables. But if you look at the concept of Hezbollah and how it changed from 1982 up until today, where now it's not only about freedom fighters and supporting the community, it's also having members of parliament, it's also having
Mm.
ministers ruling the country or taking part in ruling the country, because if it were really them ruling the country, we would have a president by now. We would not have a foreign minister issuing statements that by God are funny. So if they were ruling, it would have been different, but they are part of the ruling class since 2005, but they were really a big part of the ruling class since the elections of 2018 up until now. Now, after this round of fight with the Zionist entity, I think that the upcoming electoral process in Lebanon will be redefining the entire system of governance because of the power of the resistance and its community that it has been taking care of since the early 2000s, basically from the liberation of 2000 up to now. So when you ask me about the concept, what it is,
Mm.
actually, it is building a community that is decolonized.
Mm.
What do I mean by building a community? How do you build a community? You don't just need people. You need people. You need to take care of these people medically. You need education. You need jobs. You need economy. So it's basically building a system of governance that is not submissive to colonial terms, that is not abiding by capitalism. Yes, it is in part capitalist because at the end of the day, we are still being controlled by the US dollar in a global economy, which affects an economy like Lebanon, which fell apart
Mm.
basically in 2019. But at the end of the day, how they proceed with their activities in their own institutions, it is decolonized, decapitalized. I mean, Hezbollah at this day and age is the only community in West Asia that is providing loans and help for its Muslim community without
Mm.
the usage of interest, without the usage of what Islam says is haram in the notion of the modern capitalist economy. Hezbollah is basically the only entity right now in West Asia that can provide you medical assistance that literally equates to less than $1. If you are in need and you go to their medical centers, I'm not talking about the hospital, that's a different issue. Medical centers in neighborhoods, in closed neighborhoods, hundreds of medical centers, you need to see a doctor. You can see a doctor today and you will get the treatment that you need in less than $1. That is something I only found in one place when I visited Cuba 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I had an amazing visit to Havana, Cuba. And I saw the exact same thing, despite the fact that Cuba is in dire need of assistance economically, but at the level of education and medicine, top tier. The same thing right here. So this concept needs to be not copy-paste, it needs to be taught to the other axis of resistance factions, so it can be adhered into their own community. Because even if we are all mostly Arabs, most of us in this axis are Arabs, all of us are Muslims, but at the end of the day, we do have a ton of cultural differences and traditions. That's why it needs to be inherited it needs to be applied, but according to the rules that are effective in that certain community. The rules that are effective in Lebanon are certainly not effective in Iraq or in Yemen, for example. So you can take that concept, take that know-how, and then take it to that other faction of the axis of resistance and say, look, we have, for example, this protocol for education. How would you like to apply it? Or which part of it would you like to apply in your own schools or system of schooling and education? This is how the know-how is transferred from one faction of the axis of resistance to the other. And it started in Lebanon because they took the know-how from the Islamic Republic of Iran, because before the 1979 revolution, the level of illiteracy in Iran was touching 80%. Today, it is full literacy, 99.9%, especially with women. That was not the case in Lebanon. Literacy was not something Lebanon that suffered from, but the right kind of education and the presence of educational institutions in the extremities in Lebanon was nowhere to be found. If you were living in South Lebanon or the Beqa or Akkad, North Lebanon, you didn't have schools, you didn't have hospitals. So they were sending their kids all the way to the capital, which means that they have to go either live with relatives or live in big campuses and dorms with little to eat, with little for transportation, just to get the necessary needed amount of education. The biggest of all of examples was something that my daughter presented today in her school project, was Hassan Kamal al-Sabbah from South Lebanon, the genius, named the youngest genius in engineering and aviation in 1932. He passed away in 1935 because he was killed in New York, because he was coming back to an amazing project in West Asia. But that man, who we call the father of the solar cell, came from there. But he came from Nabatiya, but there was no school there. He had his elementary education there, but he then was sent to Beirut, and then he was sent to Syria, to Damascus, and then he became a teacher in Damascus, and then again a teacher in Lebanon in one of the biggest universities known as the American University of Beirut, and then sent to Illinois, to the University of Illinois and MIT to get his education. So it was very scarce. Can you imagine the parents of this one man went through all of this hard time to get him a good quality of education? Imagine if good education was present for the entire community at that time, what would have happened? This is what the resistance was able to do, give equal opportunities to all the civilians in our country. Because if I kid you not, if you read the history of Lebanon, it is well known that the good education, the best form of representation outside of Lebanon and inside, the political esteem and the power to and the capability to rule the country was in the hands of Christians in Lebanon, not Muslims, because Christians were directly related to colonial powers, and they were given all franchises and all the banking power to rule the country, which is why now we have a political dilemma in Lebanon, because those franchises are still in the hands of the minority Christians, who are adamant on ruling the country instead of diminishing those sectarian titles and having a full election that everyone takes part of equally. They are still in that inferiority
Mm.
complex, not allowing their brain to function properly because they still see us as second
Okay,
class
okay.
citizens. That's not going to
Okay,
work.
Marwa. Okay, I get your point that the axis of residence have many dimension, uh, fulfill a basic need of the people, education, and also maybe healthcare. But my question more is about the same. Does your statement has the same fashion? I mean, the same language. What happened in Iraq? What happened in Syria? What happened in Yemen? I think like what you say, that different environment. Okay,
Yeah.
let's talk another big issue now about the multipolar world. You know that the bridge movement, yeah, the Ukraine war, the potential for South China Sea war, the axis of resistance movement, will all these dimension form multipolar world? What do you think?
Um, Look, when you want to really understand what's going on in the world, you need to see who um, whose interest is it to have calamities or to have progress and prosperity? Who really has the steering wheel? Who's behind that steering wheel that either brings peace or brings war? And we need not to hide behind our finger, Muhammad. We need to know that there are superpowers in this world, economic superpowers, military superpowers. I can say and I can talk tons about how much the resistance has in West Asia has developed over the years. But at the end of the day, if I say that the United States of America is weak militarily, then I'm ignorant. I don't know what I'm talking about. No, we need to recognize that there are powers in this world that are run by people who seek to control resources. And to be able to do that, they need to control communities. Because if you want to get a small resource, let's say from Ukraine, Ukraine is known for what, for example? One of the important issues that Ukraine is very well known to export, for example, is wheat.
Mm,
Wheat and oil. Let's talk about wheat for a second. If I want to control, if I am a woman of power, I want to control the production of wheat all across the world, I would have to go to the resource. I would have to go to the source to get that resource. And Ukraine is one of the sources, as is Egypt, as is Syria. Just a small remark, from 2021 to 2023, every year when time comes for Syria to harvest its wheat, suddenly the wheat is on fire. It's lit. This is
mm,
just an example of what I want to present to you. When we look at who actually is behind that steering wheel that wants to get that resource, we then understand why there was some sort of bickering that turned into a war in that area. Let's move on to the Far East. Let's forget Ukraine, move on to the Far East. In your opinion, Muhammad, why do you think the United States of America is interested in Hong Kong?
I don't know. Answer.
No, I want to ask you. You are living supposedly in the Far East or in East Asia. Why do you think for decades now the U.S. is interested in a small pot of land where China is, and they're trying to help them for freedom and democracy? Do you think that the United States of America really cares about freedom of democracy? If they really cared about freedom of democracy, they would have freed their own people. It is still up to now a system of segregation inside of the United States of America. So no, it's not that. Then there's a
Mm.
second option. What is it? Is it that Hong Kong has resources? As far as I know, it's too small to have any significant when it comes to resources. Then it's the third option, a strategic position. A strategic position for a superpower to have a foot inside in order to be able to control either maritime tracks or land tracks. Let's move
Mm.
on from the China Sea and East Asia to the mid Asian continent, to the center of the Asian continent. Why are there only bickering and wars on the line that is known as the China Silk Road? If you look at the map, if you like just put the map right now and look at it, you will see that there is fighting and bickering on the exact same spots that are strategic to open borders between the peoples of this region and to allow import and export to become easier for them, to a certain point that if peace really resides in that area, it would become near zero when it comes to expenses. It would become an open border. That is what I want to say. They will become really a one people with different diverse nationalities. If that happens, you know what happens to the people of interest who want to make big bucks, big money, and still rule the world? They are kicked out. So that's not a viable option. So when you say it's a multipolar, no, it's a unipolar, this terminology, this political terminology really means nothing to the nomads on the Silk Road who live by ends meet on a simple break of bread because their work is to transport material, for example, from the border of Pakistan to a city in Afghanistan, or from, for example, the northwestern part of China into Russia. This is their work. This is the work that they inherited from their ancestors because this is where they found themselves born, in that area. So they take that job and they work through it. When I say it's a multipolar war that ended up in a bomb that fell on you, Mr. Nomad, and your family, while you were just trying to export what your country was making to the other country, he's not going to understand that. He's just going to see a bomb that falls on his head. But when we go up away and look eagle-eyed towards the confrontation, we see that it is big hands trying to move military bases in the area. And no surprise, these military bases are situated in very strategic points of maritime and road export-import roads, and at the same time where resources are. Why do you think, what do Americans not ask themselves, why are the Americans sitting in the eastern part of the Euphrates, specifically at Al Omar oil field and Conoco oil field? Do Americans not ask where their kids are going? Heck, if I had a kid who wants to go to the front line, I want to know which front line, who's he fighting for? If I am an American sending my child to the army and he says, I'm going to Syria, the first question they'll ask, why? Why are you going to Syria? Why are you going to this specific place? Then you get one of these big hands who tells you we are going there because we need to protect the oil. One, that's not your oil. Two, protected from one. From whom? You are going to an area that's 10,000 miles away from your shores to protect the oil that is in a land called Syria. Against whom? Against Syrians whom you are suffocating? I mean, these are simple questions. You might like to put it in a big worded question like, is it a multipolar war or unipolar? At the end of the day, big states are going to do what's best in the interests of these big states. And these small nomads that we are talking about are those who are going to be either crushed or given weapons to fight other nomads for imaginary conflicts that are made up. Can you tell me, up for now, for example, since I'm not going to go as far back as it started, but I'm going to say since the 70s. From the 70s up until now, can you tell me what the Americans have done for the Kurds of northern Syria and northern Iraq and southern Turkey? Zero. Zero. Yet the Turks bombed them. There was bickering between Iraq and the Kurds. At some point, there was bickering between Iran and the Kurds, but now Iranians, Kurds are identified as part of Iran. They are part of the Islamic Republic of Iran. But specifically in Syria, in northern Syria, northern Iraq, southern Turkey, Zionist entity and the Israel and the United States of America have been using the Kurds under the pretext of giving them independence and autonomy, and they have never, even for once, drafted a constitution, if you will, for them to assemble themselves and make a state. Then why are they there? Why do the Kurds still think that for any reason the Americans are going to help them to make their own country when the time was ripe? During the middle of the war of Syria, they never helped them. Blacks, on the contrary, they left them for Turkey to bomb them. So the question, my friend, is, as a part of this state that you live in, whether you are in Ukraine, in Syria, in Iraq, wherever you are. If you are a national in that area, the first question that you should ask yourself, what am I fighting for? Who am I fighting with? And what kind of a future am I giving my children? Answering these three questions will clear your eyes, because when someone is incited with terrorism, sectarianism, hate, it blinds the eyesight. You need to clear that. Ask those questions, and then the answer would be clear. If Ukrainians had just the time and the like the fathomness, the amount of understanding that needs to be to understand that they and Russians speak the same language, come from the same ancestry, have never had to fight except shoulder to shoulder. Why are they fighting now, and because of whom? I think the war would end. But it's not them now doing the fighting. It's not them putting the strategies. This is what makes it different in the axis of resistance. It is us who make the strategies. It is not Iran who told us to begin bombing occupied sites in South Lebanon on October 8th. It was the resistance of that area. It was not Iran that told the Shami to bomb the occupation in, especially in areas like the bordering area between Syria and Iraq. It was the actual Iraqis. So it's about determination, the right of self-determination, the right of taking the decision yourself away from those multipolar powers, if you will.
Okay, Marwa, I think your explanation more detailed than Said Hassan Nasrullah and Syed Naim, I think. Syed Naim, when journalists asked to him, what is different between philosophy, ideology between Hezbollah and Hamas, etc., etc., and the answer is Hezbollah, birth to very, very practical movement action. Okay. Anyway, what my understanding is confronting, like you are in the axis of resistance, confronting imperialism, confronting colonialism is same with confronting unitarianism. So maybe would be multipolar. What I don't know. I have to invite Alexander Dugin to talk with you in my show someday. Okay, but let me put in that the homework of China in Taiwan case and Russia and Ukraine case, and your word in axis of resistance, make it interconnected with the Gaza issue. Okay, you know that there is a project Ben
Let me
Gurion.
just stop you. I think I meant to say Taiwan, but I said Hong Kong by mistake, so I'm sorry for that.
Okay. Let's talk about the Gaza to interconnect
Situation.
it. Okay,
Yeah.
in situation in Gaza, we know about Ben Gurion project. Okay,
Yeah.
what is the behind of the genocide Israel in the Gaza people now? Okay, my question is, please explain whether the war in Gaza, the expulsion of U.S. troops from region into one front, will contribute to formation of what we call multipolar world, because
Yeah.
you are in the middle of axis of resistance, not
Yes.
only liberate Palestine, from the occupation of Israel, but also
But
expulsion
let us
of U.S.
begin.
troops in the
Yeah.
region. Okay.
Well, let us begin by not putting this multipolar world as a definition for what might come next after the unipolar world. It not necessarily has to be a multipolar world. It can be just a world of alliances according to interests of each nation that gets pinpointed on agreements in a sane world of utopia. That's far from happening, but let's not call it multi-power, because when this ends, my friend, I think major powers in the world are going to find themselves no longer being powers, but that's another case to discuss later. But when we link Gaza, when you talk about Gaza and how we can link it to Taiwan or to what's happening in Ukraine, we should stop for a moment, because it's different. It's not the same. But what makes it a very important cause for the people who are now unifying their battles to defend and protect Gaza is simple human rights, and second, a religious incitement. People fail to understand that the world or the land that we live on is a land that we consider as coming from prophets and sacred spiritual beings that we believe in. Hence why Al-Quds, what is known as Jerusalem, is very important for Muslims because it was the first of the Qiblas. Okay? Hence why it is also very important for Christians because it's where, so historically said that it was where Jesus Christ was born. So, and where the Jews say that they were promised this land by their God. So there is a religious variable here. It's very powerful. But at the same time, there is also the issue of rising against powers who don't see you except as either money-making machine from your resources, example, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, or you are standing in the way of their projects, aka Gaza and the Ben Gurion project, that people might not have heard of or have heard little about. But Gaza in specific, what it means for the people who are trying to defend it, it means a new 1948 exodus. It means a renewal, a start over of the Palestinian calamity and catastrophe. By kicking out the people of Gaza, who were before kicked out initially from the northern part of Palestine, whether from the Galilee or from Jaffa, Haifa, Jenin, wherever they were kicked out. Only 30% of the people who live in Gaza are actually from Gaza. 70% of them were kicked out. They were displaced by the occupation. So losing Gaza again, the same way that Palestine, historic Palestine, was lost in 1948, is something huge that touches religiously and at a matter of dignity, because the Arabs are known to be dignified, meaning that they put their dignity in front of their own lives. So it's about religion, it's about dignity, protecting your own people, and at the same time about making sure that Gaza stayed steadfast, because if Gaza goes, by God, South Lebanon will be next, northern Egypt will be next, the western part of Jordan and the southern part of Syria will be next. And this is not me saying. You could go up and look up the videos of Zionist entity leaders saying that. There's one of them that was really recently took a trend on TikTok and on social media, where one of them was saying that our land, Israel, the Zionist Israel, starts from the borders of Yemen all the way to half of Turkey. I was like, okay, that's a lot of imagination, but this is what they are talking about. And this is the case if Gaza goes away. This is the case if Jenin is eliminated. This is the case if Hezbollah refuses to protect South Lebanon. Like that, they can come back. So it is this basic necessity of protecting Gaza for the people who are directly involved in this protection. Now, if you go on a bigger scale and look at why is it important for China and Russia, for example, to defend Palestine, and why is it for European communities who are rising against their governments to actually support Palestine? This goes beyond the scope of a one world, one destiny. It goes into the scope of totalitarianism. It goes into the scope of taking away the freedoms of the peoples, especially at the day and age that we are in. If you remember, we passed COVID, and COVID was very, very intense to the Western world because it not only took away the freedoms of the people, it changed their constitution into no return. And this scares the white West, the people who are under those regimes. And they now see what's happening in Gaza, the genocide, the ethnic cleansing, the level of cultural genocide, as well as human genocide. And they look at themselves and see, well, if they can stop us from leaving our houses, and if they take away our jobs, and if they take away our right to freedom of expression and freedom of basically freedom of transportation, of moving inside of our own country, they could easily divide us into communities, and this could by all means become this very this famous a series of movies. I forgot the name of it, but it's where you divide sectors, sector 1, sector 2, sector 3, certain countries. They started seeing it as such. They started the Hunger Games. They started getting the Hunger Games into their head as it can actually become a reality if we allow genocide to happen in front of our own eyes and not defend the people of Palestine. Because, my friend, there are a lot of people, especially in the West, who didn't really care about the Palestinian cause, or have never even heard about what happened in Palestine. But the technology that is at the tip of our fingers, that showed the people how you could be alive and then in seconds dead, only because you're living in a certain spot under an occupation, it just woke up the beast, especially in the hearts of and minds of Generation Z, the generation, the newest generation that was not brainwashed by the mainstream media of the 70s and the 80s. And that is, my friend, the biggest problem for the West at the moment. Not that we, as Axis of Resistance, are standing together. They anticipated this. What they didn't anticipate is their own communities rising against them because of a small swath of land known as Gaza. That's what connects the world to Gaza. And at the same time, it is having powers like China and Russia speak on behalf of Palestine is immensely important for formulating a new post-United Nations world. And I'm so excited to see that world.
Okay, Marwa, I think from your explanation, make me understand that the tanks in Gaza now going to regional war, because if you want to beat Israel, you have to beat the supporter of Israel. We
Yes.
name it as a NATO in the Middle East. So the axis of resistance, you are involved in axis of resistance. You are the spokesperson of axis of resistance, okay? Confronting NATO in Middle East now. So my
Mhm.
question is, it will change the issue from the liberate Palestine from occupation, yeah, in Gaza and in the West Bank, or it would be another story because the war will expand, or will be still consistent with the main goal to liberate Palestine from Israel occupation. What do you think?
You're asking me that if Israel tomorrow decides to leave Palestine and the entire historic Palestinian map is liberated, do you think you're asking me if that would be it for the axis of resistance? If that's your question, my answer is
Yes?
absolutely not. This is
No?
just the beginning. Liberating Palestine, liberating historic Palestine is just the beginning, because we fully believe that we need to liberate all of Syria. We need to liberate all of Iraq, Yemen, Bahrain. We need to get Sudan back to where Sudan should be standing. We need to liberate the peoples who are under oppression. This is what the axis of resistance is, and this what brings us back to the ideology of the axis of resistance. It's not an ideology of Shia Islam. It's an ideology of Islam, point. The ideology of Islam is that wherever there is an oppressed person, you need to help that person. You need to stand on the right side of history. This is what Islam is about. Or else, my friend, I would not be a Muslim. If this is not what the notion of Islam is, I don't need Islam. If Islam doesn't teach us to stand united with everyone, even non Muslims, but who are respectful people, who have dignity, who have rights, we need to stand with them. This world order, this rule based world order that works on behalf of the United States of America needs to end. Even if it's going to take 100 years, it needs to end.
Okay, Marwa, I think we have a problem with the internet here. Okay, anyway, thank you very much for joining my show, and I hope we can talk with another story. Thank you very much.